Okay, let's continue to talk about socialization and how it impacts our self-concept, self-esteem, and identity. So I wanted to start to give you some examples now of the socialization dynamic coming into play. So one way it comes into play is that we have a tendency to engage in social comparison. So what social comparison is we look out into the world and we look at people who are like us, similarly situated to us, or people who are maybe living a life that we aspire to, right? Or just looking at the world to see how it is, right? And we will engage in these social comparisons. So more specifically, we'll look at other people and we'll say, are we superior or inferior to them, right? Am I winning at life more than they are, right? Am I doing better than them or are they doing better than me? We will also look out into the world and say, are we the same? Are they the same as me or are they different than me, right? And what does that say? Do I want to be different like them, different than from them? Do I want to be the same? What does it say about how well I'm fitting in? Right. So we will engage in these comparisons as almost like um, the gauge, right, to check how am I doing, right, compared to the rest of society. So this happens. So the reason this can kind of matter is because the info we receive back, right, that input can be distorted and sometimes strategically distorted in a way that makes us feel bad about ourselves or have reduced expectations or not have the right aspirations for ourselves that we should have, right, because we're getting that distorted feedback. So what are ways that like that feedback could be distorted in that socialization, like that reflected appraisal, right, where we adopt the belief based on the feedback could be harmful. So, for example, superior versus inferior, right? So, this would be like if a product or service, like think of advertising, right? Think of influencers on social media. If they're telling you, well, you need to have this product or service in order to be successful at something, right? You need to buy this product to be attractive, otherwise, you won't be attractive, right? Uh, is the impact of that potentially harmful? Well, yeah, right. It's saying if you don't spend money on the thing, right, you're not going to have the desired result, right? So they basically make money by coming in the room and saying you're inferior, right? Saying you are not going to measure up, you're not going to be attractive unless you buy this product, okay? And you obviously don't want to be inferior. So until you buy it and use it, you're going to be inferior. You're going to feel bad about yourself, right? You're not as attractive as they are, right? And so it's basically like coming in the room and putting you down, right? Shaming you into buying the product or service, right? Like you're not gonna measure up if you don't have it. It would be very similar to a laptop commercial where they show the new laptop and the person. On one hand, they show the student and they're doing stuff on their laptop as they're skateboarding right on campus, and they've got another person having a business meeting in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, right? And somebody else is doing something else in some weird context. And so what's going on there? Now, some of it is they're showcasing all of the amazing things the laptop can do. But there's another dynamic at play here, right? The secondary dynamic is they're kind of walking in the room and they're saying, okay, you decide to start a small business or you decide to go to college. Well, that's cute and all, but I just want you to know you're not going to measure up unless you have the new, right, like name the laptop, right? Because if you don't have that, I mean, you're just not doing everything you can to be all you can be, right? You got to have this laptop, right? Like you decide to get healthy for the new year. Well, that's great, but you got to have an Apple Watch. I mean, if you're not tracking your steps and your fitness, I mean, if you didn't track the steps, it's like if a tree fell in the woods, like and nobody hears it. Did it make a sound? Right? If you're not tracking your steps, are you doing everything you can? Right? Um, Now, again, are there products and services that can help you be more successful? Absolutely. But we also know that that's also an oversimplification, right? Like that's not the only thing you need to be successful. But they will sometimes infer this, right? They come in the room and they basically suggest if you don't buy the product or service, or you're not doing that, you are not going to be superior. You're going to be inferior, right? You're going to fall behind. The same or the different, which is again just basically do you fit in, which is a basic human need to fit in, be liked, belonged. And as I mentioned in the last video, it varies by person, but it's a need that everybody has. Now, a little quick note about this. This is why it actually matters. Speaking specifically of communication and media. So you'll hear people say things like, "It's important to have equal representation in media," right? And sometimes people hear that and they just think blah, blah, blah. That's just a PC thing, and it's all bull, and, we don't need to have equal representation, right? And all this sorts of stuff. Well, it turns out we do. There's a real research behind why this matters, and it deals with what we're talking about, identity and self-concept and self-esteem. And it's not just a PC thing. Here's why it matters. So, and I have an example here of a forensic investigator from NCIS, right, from that show, right, CSI or whatever. I don't watch those shows, but a forensic investigator from one of those shows. Here's why it matters, okay? So we know that people, specifically in terms of socialization, self-concept, self-esteem, right, when they are forming who they think they are, what's true about them, and what's good or bad about that, and what they think they can be, like what you're capable of. That's part of your self-concept, right? Like, what do you think you're capable of? So we know that people have a self-concept, self-esteem, and we know when they form that, they look into society to help them form it, right? The messages they get from other people helps them form it, okay? So here's why it matters. If you're a little girl and you're growing up, and in every movie and in every show, you never see a female forensic investigator. You never see a female who's the lead detective. You never see the female who's the head of surgery. Do you think you can be a doctor? Probably not, because you never see one, right? The reason representation in media matters is because if people don't look out into the world and see people like them also doing the things that they want to do, being the things that they want to be, they're not going to think they can do it. They're going to think it's impossible, improbable, implausible, because they've never seen it happen. Right? Like, seeing is believing a little bit when it comes to our self-concept and self-esteem. And that's why this stuff matters, right? This is why, for example, it hasn't aged well, certainly for his own personal reasons, but this is why, for example, in the 80s, The Cosby Show was extremely successful and was very successful in syndication before he ran into his own personal problems. But the show itself, so its success is one thing, but the significance of its success really matters a lot because it was a show featuring African Americans in very highly successful career fields, right? I mean, you had on the show Bill Cosby as a doctor, very successful doctor. His wife on the show is a successful lawyer. They live a very affluent life, right? And they were, the kids are going to college, and they're showing an African American family in a very affluent setting, which helped provide a role model, right? That you can be that to other African Americans to see that, right? Or another example would be when you open the website of any college campus, and they're going to have different images, right? Well, one of the images you always see is the image of like 5 students just walking next to like the clock tower building with the fall leaves, right? And they're wearing they're all smiling like somebody just told a joke. And if you look at that image, you're going to see every range of diversity possible, right? You're going to have ethnic diversity, and there'll be 18-year-olds within an 80-year-old student, right? Ethnic diversity, racial, gender, all of it, right? Now, a lot of people will look at that and go, well, that's just another PC photo. Well, no, there's a reason for that. We know it's important for this reason, right? If you don't look at if you don't look at that photo and see somebody like you are less likely to think you can go to college and be successful because you're not seeing somebody like you do it, right? So the reason a college puts that image, like every college essentially has that image up. I don't care if you're a community college, you're Harvard, you're the University of Texas, it doesn't matter. They're all using the damn image. Why is that? Because they're hoping that whoever you are, whatever you are, you're going to look at that image and see somebody like you and say, they can do it, I can do it too, right? So that's why this stuff matters, okay? And so it's not just a PC thing. There's a reason why, we know how people form their beliefs about what they're capable of is partially by what they see out in the world. They have to see other models of it. So that's kind of why it matters, right? Now look, can you make arguments that it's overcorrected? You can, right? Like if you look at representations in media, whether it's advertising or film or television, if you go back like 2000s and before, there was not a lot of diversity, right, in those representations. And I mean, I think you can make arguments even 2010 and past, there wasn't a lot of diversity. And now there's a ton of diversity, right? Now, you could make an argument it's overcorrected. Like now that they're you're trying too hard, bro, right? Like that they're trying too hard to like go out of their way to show like how diverse that particular platform or media is. But regardless, that doesn't, whether they're overcorrecting or not, that's a whole nother discussion. But it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It does matter. It's not just a PC thing. This deals with how we shape our identities, right? We got to see models like us to think we're capable of it, right? So that's kind of why this matters. But it also kind of highlights that society is impacting us, right? So it's playing a role. It's the messages other people show us and tell us. Culture, since we're kind of not just looking at this from a communication standpoint, from a culture standpoint, this also brings us back to that notion of individualistic and collectivist culture. So I talked about in one of the previous videos that cultures also socialize us about how to express our identity. So remember, identity is what you want other people to think of you, right? And so cultures impact that, right? Cultures basically impact how should you express yourself, like, and also just your self-concept, self-esteem in general. Like when you're shouting to the world, this is who I am, this is me, I'm lying, hear me roar, right? Cultures kind of tell us like how you should couch that, right? How you should communicate it. So I mentioned before this notion of like individualistic versus collectivist cultures. So individualistic cultures, they basically look at self-expression as it's fine, okay, and it's really regardless of impact, like you do you, right? And as long as you're being you, that's fine, okay? Collectivist cultures, self-expression is fine too, but they look at it though as you need to do it under the context of not offending other people though, like, or disrupting disharmony in the group, right? So in other words, you don't harm the group just for your own self-expression, and you certainly don't value your own self-expression over like harming somebody else or showing them up, right? And so it's just a different perspective, and it doesn't mean one's right or wrong, and you can argue that maybe it depends on the situation or the aspect of your identity or self-concept or self-esteem we're talking about. The reason I have this image here from the NFL is that certainly American culture is very individualistic. I mean, I don't think that's debatable in any way, at least the dominant culture. So, and if you don't believe that, all you have to do is look at social media. As I mentioned before, everything's look at me, right? Everything is like, and as we're going to talk about in a few minutes here, identity management, which is, this is the image I want to get across to people. And if you look at social media, everything's about me. And if that offends people, they can pound sand. I don't really care, right? If you look at social media, particularly on certain platforms, it's, I'm going to say whatever I want. It doesn't matter who it hurts, right? Or who it impacts. Tough. I wanted to say it, and that's all that matters, right? That's individualistic. And again, whether it's right or wrong is another question. I'm just saying own what it is, right? What it is it's an individual focus. I have this in a more lighthearted note. I have the example here of the NFL because you see this in professional sports in America, right? Modern professional sports. I'm a sports fan, but you could be watching, you're watching a week 7 NFL game between two teams that are terrible, right? And somebody scores a touchdown in the third quarter and their team's down 21 points. Like it's a meaningless touchdown. And they're dancing around like they just caught a winning 50-yard pass in the Super Bowl, right? Look at me. A regular season NBA game. Somebody hits a 3 and we're going through all the dancing, geriatrics, gyrades, that's improper words, improper language, not English. I don't know. I can't talk all of a sudden. They're just dancing around again like they just won the finals, right? And it's just a random 3, and they're all the showboating, all the stuff they're doing in baseball now. Somebody hits a home run, it's the constant, bat flipping and all this sorts of stuff. And look, I know that I'm sounding very like old man get off my lawn, right? Old man shouts at cloud. I'm not necessarily criticizing it, but what I'm saying is you do have to own what it is, right? What it is me, my self-expression, my like basically giving myself props is what matters. Because you can't say that it's good sportsmanship. You can't say that when you you hit a home run and you flip the bat, that you're not showing up the opponent. You are, right? When somebody scores one of those touchdowns and they're dancing around doing their thing, is that to like pay homage to the offensive line? Great job, right? Great pass by the quarterback. No, it's look at me, right? So, I mean, you still got to own what you're doing, right? Own it, right? Like you be accountable for what it is, right? That's what I'm saying. It doesn't mean it's bad, right? I'm not necessarily saying it's bad. Look, some of those things I do think go over the top and are bad and aren't, are beyond like poor sportsmanship. But I'm just pointing out that like in our culture, we're very much like that. We're very much like, I can do whatever I want as long as I wanted to do it, and who cares? Like the downstream effects of that. Now, look, I'm giving you examples that certainly a lot of these you can kind of interpret as bad things. There's obviously situations where that's very positive, right? There's situations where people need to speak out, right? And it's important that they're heard and all that sorts of stuff. But I'm just saying we're very individualistic, right? And by the way, a little side note on the sports thing. What's a little bit weird about that, if any of you are baseball fans out there, is baseball actually used to be very collectivist. It used to be, you didn't do those things. And it's only really been in the last 6-7 years that baseball, it's not even that long, even maybe 5 years, that baseball has embraced kind of like the celebration dynamic. You didn't do this. And even in the NFL, you can go back to the late 80s and 90s, and this stuff, the celebration, you didn't see that stuff. And in fact, if you did, there were like fights on the field. Like it wasn't, so that even that's like evolved, right, to change a lot. So you have these two different things, but where cultures come into play in terms of socialization is usually it's telling us individualistic or collectivist dynamics. It's usually the culture telling us, hey, express yourself with the main principle in mind being you do you, and then regardless of effects. And then other people saying, other cultures, collectivist cultures, telling us express your identity as long as it fits into the group, it maintains harmony of the group, right? So that's kind of a big way that culture comes into play. And cultures also will tell us, they socialize us if something's good or bad. So an example of that would be, if you want to belong to a certain group, or you do belong to a certain group, and sometimes the greater society at large, whether it's media or institutions or school or government, they will tell you it's good to be a member of that group, right? You should be proud of that. And then there's other groups where they will tell you it's bad, right, to be a member of that group, or try to make you feel bad about that. And sometimes they're right. Those groups are good or bad, and sometimes they're wrong, right? Sometimes they have an agenda behind that. But that's an example of the culture socializing us. So a lot of different things come into play. Why does it get distorted? So why does our self-concept, self-esteem kind of get screwy, right? Kind of get off? So they can be wrong. They can just be inaccurate. In other words, it's just not true about you for a couple of reasons. So they can be distorted based on, they can be wrong basically based on, first of all, distorted feedback. So this is when the feedback you're getting is off for a variety of reasons, right? Social expectations can make them wrong. Emphasis on perfection, and then obsolete information. So distorted feedback. This is basically when we are getting feedback that is just bad information. It could be outdated information. It could be, or principles or beliefs that we believe that really weren't accurate, and we're just not moving on from them. It could be because there is an actual, which is similar to obsolete information, right? It's just outdated. Sometimes it's distorted because there's an agenda. So go back to advertising. Like, companies don't have, you don't see the commercials. I know you guys are all, you've unplugged the cord and you're just streaming without ads and stuff. But like, if you ever get exposed to ads, advertisements or influencers on social media, there isn't a lot of money in just coming in the room and saying, hey, I just wanted you to know you're okay. Like, you're fine. You don't have to change anything. You just keep being you. I don't want you to buy, subscribe, like anything. You just do you, right? And then they leave. You're doing okay. No, you make money by telling people something's wrong with them, or they're not trying their best, they're not doing their best, and the only way to fix what's wrong with you, or to know you're doing your best or you're trying your best, is to buy the product or service, right? So sometimes it's distorted because they're trying to make money on you, right? Or it's distorted because they want to get you to believe or aspire to certain things because it helps them in some way, whatever it may be. Social expectations. So this could be where you feel like society is pressuring you or telling you you should adopt a concept within your self-concept or you should feel a certain way, good or bad, about something, aka your self-esteem should be a certain way because of what society is telling you, right? It'd be like, let's say you identify as a member of a group, and society tends to look at that group badly or negatively, right? Or there's people in society who look at that group negatively or badly. It'd be like if you felt pressure to hide that aspect of your self-concept or self-esteem. If you felt pressure to not express that as part of your identity, right? Identity is what you put out there for other people, right? So it'd be like if there was something about me that I thought was true, that maybe I thought positively about, but society thinks negatively about. So I hide it, or it influences what I put out there in the world because of those social expectations on me, right? And so social expectations can impact your self-concept or self-esteem in certain ways. And then emphasis on perfection. So this is usually where your self-concept your self-esteem goes down because you put this pressure on yourself to be perfect in every way, right? And then when you're not perfect, you basically feel bad. So the problem with this is basically these are situations where we expect ourselves to be perfect and then we're not perfect, so we feel bad about it, right? Like I just said, and then your self-esteem goes down. Now, what's harmful about this is that the emphasis on perfection is we're chasing the unattainable, and this is actually really harmful, and it's a common thing with people's everyday thinking. Okay, it's a common practice we engage in. So it's basically a slippery slope fallacy. It usually involves like other types of thinking that's not logical and not rational, like slippery slope fallacies and things like that. But it can be really harmful on you, and it's stupid. You don't want to chase perfection. So to give you an example of like the negative cycle of like the emphasis on perfection and why it's just kind of stupid. So, or like how this would happen. The example would be like somebody starts a diet. Like this happens a lot with dieters. So somebody starts a diet and it's like Monday and they're like, all right, I'm starting the diet. And from now on until I reach my goal weight, it's nothing but like free range kiwi and coconut water for me. And I'm going to the gym 7 days a week. And I'm also running 5 miles. By the way, kiwi cannot be free range. It's not a thing. Free range grass fed kiwi. Okay, so you start the diet, you're cruising along, and you've been doing great all week, and then on Friday, your friend's like, want to go to lunch? And you're like, sure, I can handle it. Okay, you believe in yourself. You can't handle it. You go to lunch, and you have the extreme fajitas and nachos, and you just totally blow your diet. So Friday, you get out of lunch, right? Thanks, friend, for nothing. What does the average dieter do? Do they immediately like stay on the diet? No, right? Like a lot of dieters, what they do, okay, is they say, well, I've already blown the diet today. So you know what that means? Cheat day, right? I mean, because after all, I've already had a bad lunch. Now, for those of you that are not serial dieters, I might want to help you by defining what cheat day means. For a lot of people, unfortunately, what cheat day means is I am now going to binge eat every awful thing I can until midnight. Because after all, it's cheat day. Okay? And then I'll start the diet tomorrow. So they do that. And then on Saturday, it turns out it's kind of hard to start a diet when you've eaten a bunch of junk because food has, addictive properties and makes you feel like crap. So then you're kind of like, I guess I'll start on Monday. I mean, you can't resurrect a diet on Saturday. That doesn't make any sense, right? And then they try to start again on Monday. So what just happened there? The emphasis on perfection just led you to like totally blow your goal, and you're not going to lose weight. Because what happened in this hypothetical is the person was on the diet for 4 days and off the diet for 3, even if they start again on Monday. And by the way, that's not good enough, right? Like for people that want to lose weight, like when you look, dieting is hard. If you need to lose weight and you want to lose weight and you're trying to do it, it ain't easy. If it was easy, everybody who want to lose weight would do it. It's extremely hard. In fact, most people can't, I would say, right? Like, I don't have to like look up the numbers to know that like most people want to lose weight, don't do it, right? So what happened here? Well, the fact that you weren't perfect isn't what killed you. It's the emphasis on perfection that killed you, and there's a difference. So think about it. When the person first went off the diet, If they had, after the bad lunch, immediately the rest of the day on that Friday stayed on the diet and were on the diet Saturday and Sunday, they would still reach their goal. What killed them was not the bad lunch on Friday. What killed you is that you let Friday turn into a 3-day binge fest. And why did you let it turn into a 3-day binge fest? Because you weren't perfect. Because you were chasing perfection. By the way, that's slippery slope thinking. I mentioned it's the perfection is also the illogical chase of perfection is tied to a lot of other logical fallacies. So the logical fallacy of slippery slope is basically, I took one step, I have to keep going. Right? So I already blew the diet, I might as well keep going. Which is illogical, because just because you took one step doesn't mean you have to take another. You could stop, you could draw a line in the sand, right? But that's not what people do. They don't stop. So that's this notion of like slippery slope thinking, by the way. So when I say it's the emphasis on perfection that killed you, and that you don't need to be perfect to do it, because think about it. Again, dieting is hard. So doing the right thing, like staying on your diet 4 days and off 3 days, doing the right thing 60% of the time is not good enough, Buttercup, right? But let's just say the person wasn't chasing perfection. So in other words, they didn't say after the bad lunch, well, screw it, I had a bad lunch. So I've already blown it, I've already broken the seal, so I might as well keep going to 3 bad days, right? If instead they had stayed right on the diet for the rest of the day, Friday and Saturday and Sunday, now what's happened? In the 7 days that week, they had one bad meal. So that means they did the right thing. They weren't perfect, right? But they did the right thing 90% of the time instead of only 60% of the time. Well, guess what? If you do the right thing 90% of the time for anything in life, you're going to reach your goal. The difference between 90% and 10% is how fast you get there, not whether you get there. That's it. That one lunch won't matter. It delays you reaching your goal by half a day, right? But here is what happened in this scenario, because I mentioned it's the chase of perfection that killed you, not that you weren't perfect. It comes down to this. When you set goals, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Do not chase perfection. Chase good. To get what you want in life, in anything, you just got to be good. You got to do the right thing most of the time. But what most people do is they chase perfection, and then when they're inevitably not perfect, they kill themselves. They beat themselves up over it, i.e. their self-esteem goes down. So their effort goes they're cruising along 100%, bad lunch, now their effort goes down to 5%, right? And that's why they don't reach the goal. Screw it, 3 bad days, right? What happened? Their hate for themselves for not being perfect. They let perfection destroy even being good, right? And if they were just good, if they just did the right thing 90% of the time, you would get there, right? You just have to be good. Another, like, reverse engineer it. Look at it this way. People that are good with money, that have a lot of money and they seem to be good with money. Do you think they've never bought anything frivolously? Do you think they've never overpaid for something? Do you think they've never made a bad financial decision? They have. It's just that they don't waste money or make bad financial decisions most of the time. It's not that they're perfect, they're good, right? The people that are like really healthy, they have a great body and they're going out to the gym and they just seem like they're just really in shape and always eat healthy and they're doing all that stuff. I mean, spoiler alert, they've had pizza. No, they've had a beer. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean they've never had a bacon cheeseburger, right? It just means that most of the time, that's not what they eat. Most of the time, they do what's good for their health, right? So don't chase perfection. It's not needed. That's why it's not logical. And by the way, the other reason you shouldn't chase perfection is because it wouldn't make you happy anyway. That's the other kind of irony, is we're chasing something that we wouldn't even be happy. Why would you not be happy? You wouldn't be happy because if you chased... think about it, on the diet scenario. If your whole life you just were eating free-range kiwi and coconut water, would you be happy? If you could never have pizza again? Probably not, right? If you can never let yourself go. So don't do that. So these are some of the reasons that we can have a distorted self-concept, self-esteem. And the other thing why this matters is it says our identities, but really it's all of them. It's our self-concept, self-esteem. These things really resist change, and we have a tendency to once they're set, right? So once we believe certain things about ourselves and we think those things are good or bad, it's really hard to change them. And once they're set, we also have a tendency to just look for information that confirms it. So I already think this way about myself, so we look for information that confirms it, or we view things through a lens of perception that just confirms what we thought.